Every day I wake up now knowing that the same thing's going to be true. The nomination of Pete Hegseth, former Fox host, that has been just absolutely wrapped up in scandal for defense secretary, the big one, will have gotten worse. And the story around him will have gotten worse. And that comes in the form of Hegseth's interviews, public appearances, and stories about him, but then also watching as people bend themselves into pretzels, Republicans loyal to Trump, to defend Pete Hegseth, despite his lack of qualifications, despite scandal after scandal after scandal after scandal. And I want to show you the latest example of that is tough to watch. But before I do, I want to bring in Josiah from Pondering Politics, who will analyze this with me. Josiah, before we dive in, just really quickly, what is going on with this Hegseth nomination?
Man, you were still counting on one hand, and I was on like my third toe at this point. I'm like scandal after scandal after. I mean, listen, you're talking about perhaps the least qualified defense secretary nominee in the history of the union, somebody who wasn't even, Luke, he wasn't even first string on Fox and Friends. He was Fox and Friends weekend, right? He was a bench warmer. What are you talking about? To say nothing of his lack of experience, right? He's a decorated veteran, that's true, but he's never commanded, a meaningfully sized part of the United States military. He has no administrative experience in that respect, no command experience in that respect. And so this is a guy who's uniquely unqualified, and then, now he's so bad that he's sending his own mother out on tour to try to redeem his chances. Yeah. It's disastrous. But the thing is, before we play this clip, it's possible that it still goes through. That's the real sad thing.
Yeah. So now we're in the time where senators are going to have to decide if they're going to confirm the nomination or not. Here is Senator Markwayne Mullin. I don't want to say anything mean. I've been too mean lately. Markwayne Mullin cracks me up, is all I'll say. And his attempt to defend the latest concern around Hegseth, not the sexual assault allegation, not the fact that his mom called him an abuser of women before going out and saying, and not the lack of qualifications, but the fact that people around him, both in his time overseeing veterans, nonprofits, and also at Fox News, say he's drunk a lot and at inappropriate times at work. So if there's a drinking problem there, that wouldn't be great for the defense secretary. And Markwayne Mullin struggles to defend this one.
A number of your fellow Republican senators have publicly expressed concern about Hegseth's reputation for excessive alcohol drinking. Here is what Hegseth said a few days ago on the Megyn Kelly show.
First of all, I've never had a drinking problem. No one's ever approached me and said, "Oh, you should really look at getting help for a drink." Never. I've never sought counseling, never sought help. I respect and appreciate people who do.
Just a few years ago, however, on the Will Cain show, this is how Hegseth described his experience with alcohol after returning from Iraq.
I'd look around at 10 o'clock and be like, what am I going to do today? How would I drink? Some beers. How about I go have lunch and have some beers? How about I meet my one or two buddies and have some beers? And one beers leads to many, leads to self-medication, leads to I've earned this. Like, don't tell me I can't.
Okay. And then, Margaret, just for the sake of not stretching this segment out super, super long, just to summarize, and then I'll jump to the next part of this clip. Markwayne Mullin says, sort of, shame on you. Of course, people after being in combat have sometimes issues with self-medication of different kinds, and you shouldn't be mocking that. Jake Tapper understandably was like, I'm not mocking, I'm just saying if he still has drinking problems, it's probably good to know about for senators choosing to confirm him or not. And then we pick up here.
So I have done a lot of coverage of veterans and a lot of coverage of combat, and while I have never worn the uniform, I think I do have an understanding of the need of our valiant troops when they come home to self-medicate. What I'm saying is, when you're talking about drinking at 10 in the morning, that's a drinking problem. Now, it doesn't mean that there should be a stigma.
Then there's a lot of politicians that have a drinking problem, Jake.
Yes, of course. But I guess my question is...
Yeah, and then there's probably a lot of media that has a drinking problem too. And now I don't drink. I haven't tasted alcohol in many, many, many years, and never have drank at all in my life, really. And so I really don't understand that. But there's a lot of alcohol that flows through Washington D.C. on a regular basis, and I wouldn't say that people are alcoholics or they have a drinking problem because of that. I don't see it at all. I don't see that being a problem, and I really wish that the media would move on and start focusing on what he can bring to the Secretary as Secretary of Defense, because he.
Okay, I'll play a little bit more of this clip. You can tell Jake Tapper's just totally baffled. But first, what kind of defense is that, Josiah? To go, well, I think, oh my gosh, I think a lot of alcohol runs through Washington D.C. Yeah, that's. And a lot of people, I live here currently, a lot of people have a drinking problem, okay? And I don't want all those people necessarily to be the Secretary of Defense. And it's not about mocking anyone's drinking problems. We take that very seriously, totally sympathetic and loving and compassionate. It's about Hegseth, in addition to sexual assault, a credible and disturbing sexual assault allegation, in addition to just not being qualified, in addition to a terrible ideology about how to run the military, in addition to particular stories about him climbing up on stage with strippers and having to be pulled out of a strip club because he's so drunk, we have more and more reporting about how in the workplace he struggled with not drinking, which if in the workplace, in the case of Secretary of Defense, would be like the Situation Room, you're struggling with that just might not be the right role for you. That's it. But the defense is, I think a lot of drunks work here in Washington. Markwayne.
Yeah, I mean, that's not an excuse. If anything, you have just given more people reason to be concerned about other positions. And apparently you're carrying water for them. You're hiding them. You're concealing them. Hey, listen, if you think this is bad, I can tell you all kinds of highly placed alcoholics in the federal government. Like, wait, what? What? No, Markwayne, this is not the defense you think it is. Now this is just heightened the level of concern. No, I mean, I listen, Markwayne Mullin, his most robust argument, most robust defense I've ever seen, is when he and Sean O'Brien at the Teamsters nearly got into a fist fight, a literal fist fight on the floor of the United States Senate during a labor committee chaired by Senator Bernie Sanders, and he had to, go grandpa on them and, break it up and lecture them and wag his fingers. Stop it. I mean, this is the closest. That was the closest to a persuasive argument I'd ever seen from Markwayne Mullin. It was just a shouting match. So, I mean, I don't know why. I don't know whose idea it was. Hey, listen, we need somebody to go in and defend Pete Hegseth to the American people. Who's your guy? And somebody's like, I know a guy. Listen. Markwayne Mullin. Yeah, I mean, like, what's he going to do? Punch the camera? I mean, it's categorically absurd. I mean, but quite frankly, Luke, I just want to say in summation there, in Markwayne Mullin's defense, it is pretty hard at this point to offer a robust, meaningful defense of Pete Hegseth, given all the things that we have discussed and alluded to, because it's not just the potential alcohol abuse. It's not just the credible reports from coworkers, including Fox News personalities, right? NBC discussed this about a week ago that 10 Fox News employees who worked with Pete Hegseth, told NBC News that they didn't think he'd be a good fit for Secretary of Defense because of, his conduct at Fox. But it's also the credible sexual abuse allegations. It's also the indictment against his character by his own mother. And then a second indictment against his character by then begging his mother to go out and beg the American people on a press tour and Donald Trump to redeem, to try to do some sort of like public redemption arc. Well, she contributed to the attacks against him by pointing out his character flaws. And now he's trying to send her out. It's even how he's responded to this. I'm sure you've seen the clips where he was confronted by a gaggle of reporters, and he went off and said, we're not going to litigate this in the media. I don't owe anybody an explanation other than Donald Trump and my wife and God. And it's like, man, you work for the American people, not just Donald Trump. Like, I mean, but that's the mindset. Like, how can you possibly defend somebody like this? So maybe Markwayne Mullin hasn't done that bad of a job. I mean, I can't imagine what somebody else would say in his position.
I think you're right that it would have been more convincing if he went, "Oh, Jake, you want to square up? Are we fighting
Jake.
now?"
Well, Jake, you flexing on me, Jake?
Yeah.
Jake, I'll meet you by the flagpole after school, and it's going to go down, bro.
It's one of the funniest phenomena to me is whenever people go like, I disagree with you on this policy. And the other person goes, oh, really? Well, I disagree with you on that policy. And then the next response is, let's physically fight. And it's like, what? Because that's what it was. Sean O'Brien was like, go unions. And Markwayne Mullin was like, I hate unions. And then it was like, all right, so we're fighting. And then, wait, no, there's other ways to solve these problems.
Well, even the direct quote, I'm sorry, it's just so funny because I remember it's like, stand up. Why don't you stand up?
Yeah.
And then they both stood like, wait. Is there like an order to this? One of us has to stand up first. Like, is there a protocol? Like, it's so.
I'll
funny.
do it if you do it. Okay, so here's the end of that clip, and then we'll get to another example of a Republican with the worst defense to Jake Tapper.
Has a lot of good attributes too, but we only focus on the negative. And we get so caught up on running at negatives. And just because he's on this side of the confirmation process, it seems like everybody wants to point out everybody's faults. Yes, he has a past. You know, Jake, you and I both have a past, and our listeners have a past too. And we get that. He's not hiding from his past. He's answering the questions of his.
That's my concern too with some of the folks. They're like, gosh, stop focusing on the negative. As if it's such a bad thing to care when someone accuses someone else of sexual assault. What about all the positives? What about all the women in the world he did sexual assault? He still has a good ratio. It's not even like a majority of women.
It's not 50-50. Yeah.
What about all the positives? Gosh, such unequal coverage. So
what about those
biased
times
from
he
CNN?
didn't drink on the job, Luke, or like didn't have a hangover?
But then the other concerning thing is, what do you mean we all have a past? I have a past, but in that past, I don't have what Hegseth does. So what are you talking about, Markwayne? But here's Rick Scott.
Oh, God.
And watch, this is going to hurt
No.
everyone's brain. Watch,
Okay.
I've played it before, but watch the logic here, okay? And I want you to be able to really grab onto it. So Jake Tapper says, are you concerned about these allegations? Scott says, I'm not because they're anonymous. For example, the woman who's anonymous accusing him of sexual assault should come speak to you, Jake Tapper, and do so on the record. Tapper goes, but she was paid money by Hegseth to sign an NDA, so she can't. Are you saying Hegseth should release her from her NDA so that she can come talk to me? And Scott goes, no.
That these anonymous sources say these things without willing to go on your show or some show, and have you asked them all the questions?
A point that you're making here, the woman who accuses Pete of raping her in 2017, although the police, we should note, did not charge him with any crime. That woman, Pete Hegseth, paid her money, and she signed a non-disclosure agreement, so she can't come on my show to talk about it. Do you think Pete should release her from the NDA so that I can ask her the questions that you want me to?
Absolutely not. There's so many. Think about it. Jake,
absolutely
how many
absolutely
people?
Not.
Wait, Jake. We know how many people sign non-disclosures just to eliminate something. Not that they ever did anything wrong, and he was never charged with anything.
Do you want me to ask her questions, or do you not want me to ask her questions? I'm confused.
So I'm not going to suggest that somebody change a contract that they sign, but. Look, this is Trump's nominee.
Before playing more of this, I'm really trying to get away from any insults about petty things. So I'm not going to do any insults. I'm just going to make a factual statement. A factual and circular statement. Rick Scott looks the way that Rick Scott looks. That is true. And I'm noting it.
He won. A lot of people don't like the fact that he won. He won. We have to make a change as Department of Defense. We have the risk of war. The world's on fire. We've got to change how our Department of Defense is run.
Yeah, no,
he's going to do it.
I hear you, but you started this interview and saying you don't like all these anonymous accusations, and I should be able to interview these people. I'm saying, okay, shouldn't Pete Hegseth release this woman from her non-disclosure agreement so that I can do what you suggested at the top of the interview you wanted me to do?
Absolutely not. I mean, so many of these things are done for.
What is happening?
That was one of the most painful painful interviews I've ever seen a sitting Republican give, and that's a lot. He should have done the noble thing, which is fake like a connection issue. Be like, Jay,
what? I
or do the classic, well, Jay, what's that behind you? And then run. Like for the love of God, you can just see the palpable dread on his face.
I love when they try to keep a smile because they've been trained to like, you won't look nervous if you just calmly smile through it. And so then he's just strangely sitting there grinning at Jake Tapper, and he goes, absolutely not. But he says the absolutely not, like he doesn't want you to know what he just said, right? That's why Jake was like, wait, absolutely not? Absolutely not. It's so weird.
Well, he's saying absolutely not to a thing that he himself suggested. That's what made it so funny. Like, it would have been one thing if he had been like, well, I guess not. But like it'd be one thing if he said something stupid, recognized he said something stupid, and then said, sorry, I misspoke. I shouldn't have said that. They signed a non-disclosure agreement. Still very weak, by the way. But instead, he's so certainly, definitively, this is exactly what she should do. Oh, so do you think she should do that? Absolutely not. What are you, crazy, Jake? Why would you even suggest that? Why would you even ask me if I think she should do the thing that I said she should do 10 seconds ago, Jake?
You weirdo.
You weirdo, Jake.
It's like Josiah and I have some disagreements, and I'm like, Josiah's a coward for not confronting me in person, and I have a restraining order against him. It's just so contradictory. Please. And also, why these people? Is it just only these people who are willing to go defend Hegseth? Why are they picking the worst? Like, you have some people who would deliver weak arguments, but they would be nice and smooth and rhetorically effective. They pick Rick Scott, who always seems like he's moments away from, as you said, just sort of like melting into a puddle. And then Markwayne Mullin, which is very different in why he's wrong for the job, but also very wrong for the job of defending Hegseth. But those are the two that they pick. I know others have tried, but it's because those are the only who are willing.
Right. I mean, Luke, what is Rick Scott? I mean, Rick Scott, went in for the Senate Majority Leader position. He got voted out in the first round. What else is he going to do? Republicans aren't interested in passing legislation, so it's not like he's busy. The only thing he's doing in the free time is like pulling legs off spiders. And they were probably like, you know what, Rick, you've got some free time in front of you. And he like emerges from the shadows. You ever see Nosferatu? Like Rick Scott comes out of the shadows. They like lower the blinds so no sunlight comes in to disintegrate him, and he gives the world's dumbest answer to the easiest question in the world. I mean, my God,
Please show
I don't
it,
know.
Jaden. Please show it, Jaden.
Nightmare fuel there, man. Nightmare fuel. That picture alone was probably what cost him the majority leader position. Thune and Cornyn didn't even have to like advocate. They just like passed around this picture like, hey, do you want this to be the representation of the MAGA movement?
I'm sorry. That's not the important thing, but it's crazy when the villains in reality look so much like the villains in the movies. And that's what Rick Scott is. Josiah, thank you for bringing lightheartedness to such not lighthearted stories, such dark stories. Where can people find you to get more of that?
They can find me at youtube.com/@ponderingpolitics, one word. And I appreciate the collaboration, buddy.
Thanks. Now I'm just thinking about Rick Scott pulling legs off spiders.
I'm telling you, go back and watch Nosferatu. You'll see Rick Scott. If you want to see how Rick Scott gets out of bed every morning, go to Nosferatu, where the vampire just like comes straight up out of the coffin. That's Rick Scott getting ready to go to the Senate Rotunda.
Have a good rest of your day, everybody.
Yeah, you too.